Alrighty. We'll wait for another minute and a half before getting started because we haven't quite reached critical mass yet. And I'm sure people are joining us from the other sessions. Okay, I see more people trickling in. We'll wait for another 30 seconds or so and then get started. Hello, everyone. I hope you've been enjoying the conference so far. And please remember to post your questions on the Hua app and remember to also vote for the questions you would like asked in the order of priority. Thank you. Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. My name is Dr. Ashia Maria Jacob, and I am a postdoctoral fellow working at the Department of Physics and Astronomy here at JHU. Horizons by Hopkins, organized by Futures, is a university-wide professional development event designed to empower doctoral students and postdoctoral fellows across Hopkins. And it is my pleasure today to moderate this discussion on Exploring New Horizons, my expedition into research beyond academia. To begin today's expedition, I would like to briefly introduce our panelists, all of whom have found fulfilling, successful, and highly fascinating careers in research beyond academia, careers that have combined many of their interests and passions. So we're joined here today by Dr. Zachary Shendell, currently the head of research at DoorDash. Dr. Shendell received his PhD in cognitive psychology and has had years of quantitative and qualitative research experience in product innovation. Dr. Ashley Rose Young, who, after obtaining her PhD in history from Duke University, joined the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History, where she combines research and curatorial practices. And in fact, she has curated one of the museum's most celebrated initiatives, the American Food History Project. Last but not least, we have Dr. Roger Rodriguez Quinones. Dr. Rodriguez Quinones received his PhD in mechanical engineering from the University of Alabama and is currently working in the Metals and Ceramics Development Group at Boeing in Huntsville. He supports multiple R&D projects, including the CST-100 Starliner, aka the reusable spacecraft used to transport crew members to the International Space Center. Isn't that crazy? Welcome, everyone. So stats, history, food, and space. These are a few of my favorite things, and I'm certain that we will have an exciting discussion today. For our participants, please feel free to ask questions relevant to the moderated discussion within the chat feature on the Hua app or here on Zoom. I will do my best to incorporate questions as the discussion moves forward. For the last 15 minutes or so of this panel session, I will open the floor to all of your questions. Okay, let's get started. To set the stage, I'd like each of our panelists to sort of tell us a little bit more about yourselves, with some background on your education and experiences, touching upon what influenced you to pursue a PhD in your respective and chosen fields. Let's begin with Zach. Go ahead.
Hi, all. My name is Zach. I lead research at DoorDash now. My career in undergrad began as a double major in music and psychology. So I was passionate about science and I was passionate about the arts as well. And so when it came time to go and figure out what I wanted to do after school, I knew I loved doing research and I wanted to find some way to combine the passion I had around art and science. And so I found music cognition programs in the country. At the time, there was like one. This is a while ago. There's more now at Ohio State. And so I applied, got in, and spent 5 years getting a PhD in the psychology department. So technically, cognitive psychology is my PhD, but I studied music cognition. Since then, I did postdocs and have moved over to the industry side. But really, my goal at the time was to try to find a way to combine passions in research with and the arts into a single degree. And that's so it was difficult because it didn't really exist, but I found it and made it work.
Wow, that's incredible. Okay. Um, Moving on to Dr. Rosia.
Yeah, so I started off, I was saying to the panel before, as a biology major and then an environmental studies major, but eventually I found my way to history in undergrad at Yale University. It has a wonderful history department. And I started taking courses on women, food, and work in other areas where food was a critical lens into the past. And my family business was actually in gourmet grocery food stores. And my father was a high school history teacher. So conveniently enough, it was a combined passion of my parents that manifested in me. And eventually I had a transformative internship at a community museum in New Orleans called the Southern Food and Beverage Museum. And that was between my junior and senior year of undergrad. And it completely changed my life. I came to realize that I loved museums, but I finally saw museums as a place where my career could flourish. And so I actually went directly from undergrad to graduate school for an MA and PhD in history with the idea of pursuing two careers simultaneously, one as an ivory tower academic professor and one as a museum professional. And I did them both at the same time, the museum professional being somewhat more under the radar than the traditional academic track. But I was curating exhibits the entire time I was in graduate school and seeking out opportunities. And so I kind of midway through my graduate program, which took me 7.5 years instead of 5. So I'm impressed by the quickness of the science PhDs. But I found my dream job as the historian of the American Food History Project at the Smithsonian's National Museum of American History. It was a team I knew about midway through my graduate school work. And I said, I'm going to do everything I can to build up a skill set that might open up a door for me to work there. And we can talk about it a bit later, but eventually I did apply for a job here and land that job, and I've been here ever since.
Thank you. Moving on to Dr. Rodriguez Quinones.
Yeah, so in my case, so right now I'm working in Boeing Research and Technology. So basically, we work on early technologies and try to transition that into the aerospace world. So how do I decide to go to a PhD? Well, during my undergrad, I did a number of internships, many of them not in the aerospace, but I was always interested in the aerospace. So there was a pivotal time for me when I was just about to basically get another internship in pharmaceutical industry. And I sat down with who was my mentor in that moment. And he explained to me very clearly. So if you want to do leadership, project management stuff, this is the place for you. If you want to do hardcore stuff like designing a bolt, this is not the place for you. So that led me to, well, reject that internship, go into the research world and do some hardcore engineering, let's say, type of internships. I fell in love with the research. That led me to do my master's and then PhD. So my initial goal was to go back and teach. However, I landed in my dream job, I would say, with Boeing. I'm in the environment that we're very flexible. So we work with the academia developing technologies. We can teach if we want as well, but we also work in applied research. So and definitely I apply all the skills learned throughout my PhD.
Thank you. So you've all briefly, touched upon how you've been combining passions from very early on. What we'd now like to transition to is, your current careers. what motivated the transition from academic research to your current career path? Was this always, part of the plan to make this move? Or, was there a pivotal moment in your academic journeys, and how early on did that happen that you decided to move into research outside of your, university space? Maybe let's start with Ashley.
Sure. And I kind of hinted at this in my origin story, but I went into graduate school, like I said, pursuing two different careers. And the passion for public history, right, for museum work, I did keep a little bit closer to my chest because at the time, I felt that the culture of graduate school was to really create, tier one, research one professors in history. That was the goal of the institution. Interestingly, over the 7.5 years that I was at Duke, there was a really large culture shift. And by the time I graduated, the graduate school at Duke University had embraced the versatile humanist concept, this idea that individuals trained with a PhD could work beyond the academy, make significant contributions to our society through work outside the ivory tower. And in fact, I kind of became an example or like a poster child of what you could do to set yourself up for a career outside of the walls of academia. And so I speak to that transition because, like I said, I always knew I would be so happy to work outside of the academy, and it just feels right for me, and it felt right to me back then. I found the academy to be a nerve-wracking place, at times judgmental place. I had imposter syndrome often, wondering, do I have the research, skills? Do I have the writing skills to succeed in this highly competitive field? But I never really felt that within the world of museums. I love curatorial work. I love public speaking and public programs. I do live cooking demonstrations on our fantastic cooking demo stage in the heart of the museum. And it just kind of sings to my soul. And I have a public theater background and I like being out in front of people. And so I feel confident in the museum world. And I share that because I think if you're looking for a career outside of academia, pay attention to what feels good to you, where you feel confident and where you feel like you can really express yourself, because that's the thread I followed in that scary decision to really move outside of academia. At least I knew in my heart that I was pursuing a path that was fulfilling to me, and a path where I really felt I could be successful and welcomed and appreciated. And I don't regret it at all because of that.
I'm so happy you listened to that inner voice. I wonder if our other panelists had similar experiences. So maybe, Raji, can you comment on that? Did you know early on that you would be making this transition? Did that internship pivot you towards this transition?
Yeah, so I did not. So my original plan was to stay in academia. I wanted to go back home and teach. That was my original plan. So now the opportunity came. I saw the job opportunity for Boeing as they were expanding on the location where I was in Huntsville, Alabama. I look at the description of the job. It really had all the skills that I was able to develop throughout my different years of experience in academia. And then fortunately the job, I got the job. But then as I grew on the job, I realized that I had a very flexible opportunity to still work with academia. In my job position right now, I can collaborate with academia, write papers. So I can still do that part, but having the industrial focus on the research that we do. So I can do everything if I want to. It just depends on how much time I have. So at the end, I think that the job as it is, it allows me to do what I really want. So and what's aligned with my goals.
Okay, so you somehow have the best of both worlds.
Yes.
And so moving on to Zach, how did
Yeah.
the transition work out for you?
I had a model actually. My dad did the exact same thing. He got a PhD from University of Illinois in in psychology as well, human performance, and then worked at the Army Research Institute, worked at a research agency, ended up at Philip Morris. He's in his 70s now. So like, I don't know if it was necessarily a thing when he did it, but I always knew going into grad school that it was a possibility. And I kind of started out at the beginning wanting to go down that path. I was motivated similar to the other panelists by like the practical impact that yeah, go line. I went to Ohio State, so I can't cheer them on. Yeah, I was motivated by the practical impact that you can have on pretty large populations in research. So I ended up focusing a lot over my career towards the UX research side, user experience research. So I got into tech in 2013 when everything was blowing up. I worked at Netflix for almost 8 years prior to leading the research team at DoorDash. That was really where I was mostly an IC transitioning to leading a team. And there's quite a lot of things that you use and value probably from your Netflix experience now that were the direct result of research that either I did or someone on my team did. For example, the downloads. If you've ever like downloaded anything on Netflix, watched on a plane, you can thank us for pulling that off for you because they didn't want to do it and we convinced them. So there's a lot of things like that that I get really excited about how you can take research and you can affect lots of people in positive ways. At DoorDash, the passion that I have is really towards businesses. So it's interesting that Ashley was talking about grocery stores. That's a great example of like a small, medium-sized business. And so a lot of the work I do is on the B2B side, helping grow local businesses through the partnership with DoorDash. And so I find a lot of passion there. Really, it's been driven by passion throughout my career and just something that I can do research to help other people.
Oh my God, that was so insightful. Thank you. Yeah, we all owe it to you for helping us get through those long flights. So, I think you've all touched upon the transition itself, but making the transition can often be intimidating and daunting. So, how supportive were your graduate school advisors about your career choice? And were there other avenues for guidance? Did you have that support system when you went up to them and said, well, I'm not going to continue in the academic path that you foresee me in? Maybe let's start with Raji.
Yeah, so in my case, excuse me, so I sat down with my advisor and discussed the opportunity that I saw at Boeing, and we walked through the different requirements and the different skills that we're looking for the job, and analyze, if it make a lot of sense. And he really support me. He explained me of different collaborations that he have seen on the academia on research for engineering applications. And then when I got the offer, we walked through the offer. He advised me, and then we actually after I got the offer, we established collaboration. So that line stay, right? So that connection stay, and we developed some projects together, and then that even turned into some students. So definitely the advisor was crucial for making that step. His advice, and then that connection stay.
Okay, that was great. Zach?
I don't think I ever really outright said it that this is what I'm going to do and I'm cutting off academics altogether forever in any of my conversations. But my advisor left after I got my master's and went to McGill University in Montreal, like got a new job. So I was a bit orphaned. And so I just did what I wanted to do and just crushed my PhD in 3 years and got out of there as quickly as I could after that. And so I didn't really have anybody telling me that I could or couldn't do anything. I was more on my own, I think, than some of the other folks were. But interestingly, I just started teaching this year. I teach a UX research course at Santa Clara University now, and it's their first. I wrote the course from scratch. Basically, I was thinking like, if I was an undergrad and these tech jobs existed when I was undergrad, which they didn't, which will age me, what would I have wanted to know in order to prepare myself for a career that I have currently. And I just wrote a class to basically be that. So I've sort of transitioned back for fun to help other people on the teaching side, but I'm still full on industry.
Well, you've come full circle. You've become the guru for them now. So Ashley,
Yeah, I'm like, I want to take that class and I want to go back to undergrad. Um, so I think midway through graduate school, I didn't feel all that supported in my decisions to pursue curatorial work and, community art projects and things that fell outside of your typical research for a humanities PhD. I sort of had the sense that the department, broadly speaking, looked at me as unfocused, as doing errant projects that didn't really relate to their goals of producing a tenure track professor at a Research One institution. And I say that that was my perception because it wasn't necessarily that anyone said that to me outright, but it was the feeling that I had. I will say though, I just was like, you know what? I'm passionate about history. I'm incredibly passionate and serious about food as a lens, a critical lens into the past. I think it's a very serious and important way of exploring humanity and culture. And even if others laugh every time that I say I'm a historian who focuses on food, I'm just going to continue to do my work. And that's what I did. And there again was that shift. And so by the time I was finishing graduate school, and as I was about to defend my dissertation, I also started an internship with the American Food History Project at the Museum of American History. My graduate committee was excited for me. They knew all along that I had been doing curatorial work and public programming, and that's where my passions really were located. And they were excited for me and happy that I had a foot in the door at an institution where I might get a job in a really tough job market. And so they were happy. And I will say there were resources too for me later on in graduate school, not necessarily earlier on, but by the time I got that internship in my 7th year of graduate school, that was because Duke University had the Versatile Humanist program and they had funding for students to have paid internships that were sponsored by Duke, and that we could craft these internships and basically create opportunities for ourselves. So I reached out to my contacts at the Museum of American History and said, hey, here's the situation. Are you looking for anyone to have an internship? I can have a paid internship and you don't have to pay a dime. And that's what happened. And I was able to really demonstrate my skill set there and then successfully applied to a position when it opened up a few months later. But that was after years of networking. And I can't stress enough how important it is to have coffee dates, virtual or in person, to keep updated over email or through phone calls with organizations or institutions that you want to work for. Personal connections lie at the heart of so many opportunities. So, that would be the one piece of advice I would say is be your own advocate. Even if your institution has support for internships and whatnot, perhaps more important is your determination to build real friendships with potential colleagues, or at least people who are working in industries that you have an interest in exploring.
thank you. You actually touched upon my next question, which was about what resources made you reach or helped you reach the career paths that you're currently on. And would you recommend anything? So maybe Zach, we'll start with you. How did the doors of DoorDash come knocking?
Oh, well, they came knocking because I worked at Netflix, and Netflix came knocking because I worked at, it's a path, right? It's never like you just end up doing what you're doing. After my PhD, I did some postdocs, but one of my postdocs was at Altria, which is the name for Philip Morris, basically. They're a tobacco company in the US. And because I was working in like the sensory department, sensory is like the experience of your senses and how you measure that through product development. Then Unilever came calling and they wanted me to work in sensory, but on skin cleansing, skin moisturization, anti-aging, sunless tanning, whatever, personal care type products. But after I had gotten enough years there, this is maybe 7 years into my career at this point, I wasn't like super passionate about skincare. I was absolutely excited about movies, about tech, and so in music as well. So I started applying to these early tech companies that had just gone streaming, like Spotify, Netflix, things along those lines, and ended up landing the job at Netflix. So I used my early career to learn the skills necessary to take the PhD and apply it to industry, and then I turn that into how could I find something I'm super passionate about and also do something similar, which that was about 10 years ago that I made the switch to tech. But every single step would not have been possible without the prior step. I would have never gotten a postdoc without a PhD. You needed a PhD to get the job at Unilever. Now people think it's funny that I have a PhD because nobody has a PhD in tech. Most people have an HCI master's degree, which that didn't even exist when I went to undergrad. So there are things that you can do now that will set you up better for the career that I have than the things that I did, but that was the path that I took, which made sense for the time.
Thank you, Raji.
Yeah, I totally agree with Zach. So all those previous steps, all that background, right, is what leads you to that next opportunity. In my case, throughout my undergrad, I focus, I focus on trying to get internships that will make me, develop those skills on the industry, right? So I work at GE, for example. Then I work at NASA. So NASA definitely helped me land that job at Boeing, even though there was an aerospace link. But also the training that I got through my master's on analytical tools, SEM, chemical analysis, and all that stuff, helped me build that skill set. So I've been building that toolbox since my undergrad, and that helped me get that opportunity and the following, and then land this opportunity that I have right now. I continue working and developing those skills for the next opportunity. So that's something that you need to continue working on for your next step.
Okay,
I kind of
yeah,
answered already, but I will chime in about skill sets. So in grad school, I wasn't only kind of building up curatorial skill sets or there are other skill sets I'd like to note that I cultivated to kind of keep different doors open. So for example, I did 2 years as a fellow in our rare book library. And so I was learning information and library sciences work. I was learning how to work as a reference desk librarian. I also did oral history projects on the side, and oral history is a very different kind of history than the secondary and primary research that I do in my work at the museum. But I wasn't just doing curatorial work. I literally was trying to keep open many doors that kind of fall broadly under public history. And that might get me to a museum or a similar institution. And those are some skill sets that maybe, yes, I do use in my job today. But for example, the reference librarian work, and the kind of learning how to catalog archival materials and stuff, those aren't things they're not really a part of my job, but there might be a path in the future as my career grows. I'm about 6 years into my first job. I might go back to those skill sets. So I only mention that to say that it may seem like the three of us only cultivated one skill set and we followed that path and magically we're here. But I bet all three of us have these other skill sets that we've developed over time that are related and kind of somewhat jiving with each other, but may not be super relevant to the work that we have now. And so I say that also to encourage you to cultivate diverse skill sets that they harmonize with each other, but will keep different doors open to you. That's my philosophy. Others will say choose one thing and stick with it, but I really wanted to kind of keep as many doors open as I could.
No, thank you. That was going to be my follow-up, actually. Perfect transition, because there are a lot of transferable skills that you can take from academia into your industry job or research job. But is there something specific that you would say, you wish you could have cultivated more during grad school? Because we're all used to public speaking, but what are the other transferable skills that you would say you value more that would have helped your transition? Maybe we can start with Zach.
Yeah, so you all should know this, that I do a lot of hiring of folks into applied research, and there is absolutely a stereotype, particularly on the tech side, not so much on the like the physical product side where I worked prior to tech, that PhDs are too slow and care way too much about like the details and conveying all of the information that they learned rather than like fast, flexible, not ivory tower, like okay with not perfect statistics, all this kind of stuff. I know it's not true, but that stereotype exists. So one of the things that I've had to learn is how to, I don't really talk about being a PhD because in some ways, like it brings up stereotypes in people's minds. So instead, I just demonstrate that I'm just as fast, just as flexible, and I can apply all sorts of creative research methods to the industry that has no idea of what those research methods even are. Things like biometrics or eye tracking or psychometrics or any of these things that are more advanced that I would have learned in grad school. I found ways of bringing them into industry to answer implicit association task is another good example. Implicit measures of performance, memory, reaction time, etc. These are all basic cognitive psychology PhD things, but they are different than the tried and true, I'm going to do an interview or I'm going to write a survey. And so people are kind of blown away by, oh my goodness, you can do more than write a survey. But if you can break the stereotype of doing it quickly and demonstrating the value of bringing in some of these more advanced techniques, you can basically disprove the hypothesis that PhDs can't be successful in a fast-moving industry.
Just to quickly add to that, do you ever feel like holding a high-level degree like a PhD has made someone overqualified for a job? Have people gotten dismissed?
Uh, I don't think people have gotten dismissed. I mean, that wouldn't be very inclusive. But when people see the PhD, they're like, well, make sure that blah, blah, blah. They're not too slow. They're not going to be focused on whatever. It's like it comes up from the HR crowd, from the interview crowd. They've got it in their mind that
Got
this
it.
happens. And they're like, during the interview, focus on point 1, 2, and 3. And it's all these stereotypes.
Okay, got it, got it. Ashley, did you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, so some of the skill sets that I wish I had cultivated earlier in my career would be ones specifically related to management, specifically related to like budget management, to management of personnel if you have a team. And this is because I'm at a kind of a pivot point in my career or transition point where I have the opportunity now, if I'd like to move into more administrative positions. And so I have cultivated a really impressive skill set in the research realm, in the writing realm, in the public speaking realm, but I have a dearth of official experience in management. And so I'm kind of, and my organization right now is very hierarchical, very bureaucratic, and there isn't necessarily opportunity for me to gain that management experience where I'm at right now. And so, yes, I can kind of cultivate that through the mentorship of interns or through committee work outside of my current job. But I will say the area I feel lacking currently is in leadership. What we broadly define as leadership skills, management skills, administrative skills. And so I think I could have been a little bit more tactful or purposeful in cultivating those throughout graduate school, maybe through committee work and things like that. And so I'm catching up now. And it is, it's proving challenging as I think about where to next in my career. And it's hard to prove to people that you can be a great leader when you don't really have it on your resume, the evidence of that. So that would be a thought there if you're interested in administration or leadership eventually.
People management is a big one. Raji.
Yeah, so I want to make, I think, 3 points. So you mentioned before about seeing the PhDs overqualified perhaps for a job. So when I'm looking for, I'm hiring, right? So it depends on the job that I want to do or that I have somebody to fill out for. I mean, an early career person is somebody probably that we want to shape from the ground and help one of my lead engineers or so. But a PhD, would be somebody that I'm gonna put on the job and he's gonna start working right away because he learned how to be, or she learned how to be, an independent researcher, right? When he or she was in grad school. And I think, as Zach mentioned before, that his advisor moved to another job at some point. He was orphaned, right? Or was alone, right? So, I mean, he and many have been in that case, and they learn to be independent researchers, right? So you don't have somebody putting pressure on you on when to complete your research, but you know that you have to do it to achieve the goal, right? And when we look for somebody with a PhD in the industry, I mean, that person will be hitting the ground running, and then on the leadership side, that person will be leading the development of the technology, right? So maybe you already have some connections in other universities or other colleagues, and it would be helping mature the technologies and taking to the next steps that we want. So something else that I think definitely in my case I would have done more, maybe as a PhD, learn how to sell the idea, right? And I think Zach alluded first that probably the PhDs, we go into the nitty-gritties and the details, and maybe we're slow. Well, we need to learn how to sell the ideas, because and that goes, thinking on the audience, right? How do I transmit what I know to whatever audience or whomever I'm trying to sell? Because that's what is going to take you to the next step, right?
Absolutely. I mean, motivating the bigger picture is always important. Thank you.
Yes.
So since we're sort of running out of time, I'd like to quickly thank you all once again. And as we wrap up this session, what advice would you have for someone interested in making this shift in their careers? We have a lot of early academics joining us today. So what would you give them as advice for making? Maybe we can, okay, go ahead,
Thoughts,
Ashley.
I would say you don't have to try to be fearless when you make this transition, because it's scary and it's okay to be fearful. To expect not to have that fear is, I don't think it's realistic. But what I will say is that as you make the transition, I think you will be surprised and delighted by the potential opportunities that you'll find on the other side of the ivory tower. I have scores and scores of colleagues who have moved beyond academia, who are incredibly happy and incredibly fulfilled to pursue their passions and weave their academic interests into their current positions in these quote unquote non-traditional career paths. I think it could be a really fruitful place. I think the impact can be really significant in ways that sometimes you can't have in the academy. I think Zach has spoken to that. Raji, your work as well speaks to that. And it has given me a profound sense of purpose. I actually feel my work at the Museum of American History is reaching far more people than I ever would have as a scholar. My public writing is reaching far more people than any kind of scholarly work that I do. Although I'll note that I'm still producing scholarly research as well. Surprisingly, the Smithsonian is still very academic, and there's expectations of academic publishing for historians there, but there is also a strong encouragement to write for a public audience. And so I don't know, I actually feel more fulfilled because my work has a bigger impact. And I think you can find that outside of the academy. So it's okay to be afraid, work through the fear, but know on the other side of things that there can be greener pastures. So just hang in there.
Thank you. That was very kind. Zach.
Yes, so you have to think about what your goal is. That's the biggest advice I would say. Not your career goal, but what are you trying to accomplish with your research? So in academics, it's often to further some field or to learn something new or innovative. In industry, you have to think of a Venn diagram, and this is the absolute best thing that you can do as a researcher in applied industry. That what they care about, if you work for a company, is making money, right? Mm-hmm. But what you care about is helping people and in bringing the voice of the people that are using your products into the product innovation space. And what you can do, the best thing that you can do is find out where those two things overlap. So what can I do that will help the people that use the product experience it better? but will also grow the business in some kind of way. And that is your goal. It's not always just for learning's sake. It's you need to find the overlap between those two things. And if you can create practical examples of how you've actually done that prior to going to any interview, you will be 10 steps ahead of everyone else. And honestly, research is fairly free. The products exist, especially on the tech side, even in the physical product side, they exist. They're not great. You use them, you know they're not great. You know what the problems are. You can easily do research on your own through free survey tools or through interviews with family and friends or just scraping online social media, stuff like that, to find insights and propose solutions to some problems that exist out there and demonstrate that you can apply your PhD skills to industry if you get into any sort of interview setting. That would be my number one advice.
Perfect. Thank you also for breaking it down so systematically. That was so useful. Raji.
Yeah, so I would say I agree with Ashley. You know, there's fear, right? But you know, there's fear in every transition, so you just have to take the step. And you know, Zach mentioned also your goals, right? So you have to think about your goals. So what do you want to do? And that's what's going to define which step to take. If you want to be in academia, you know, teach if that's what your passion is, for example, in research world, academia is a place. If you really want to solve issues in a fast pace, let's say, maybe industry is your thing. So it depends all on your goals, and you know, you have the answer. You have to be honest with yourself and do the assessment.
Perfect. Thank you all. We've covered most of the questions that came up on Whova. There was one funny question. How many applications did you send before you got your job opportunity? Any answers?
I sent a lot. I interviewed at random places. Coke. I interviewed at the CIA as well. That was
Can
a
you
funny.
talk about that?
Yeah, I can tell you that because I didn't get the job, but I got all the way through everything. I had to write essays. I had to go and do a whole battery of like cognitive testing. Then I had to do an
Wow.
interview. It was really far along, and then they just didn't end up choosing me. But I had a lot of fun experiences with random companies before I ended up working in industry. But I often think about what my life would have been like if I had gotten that job.
Okay.
And over with me in the federal workers realm. I will say for me, I was very lucky in that I applied to one job, and that's the job that I have. But I think that demonstrates the power of a successful internship experience and how it is invaluable to take those opportunities in the summer or whatever, even if it's 6 weeks. And if your university supports it, try to get those internship experiences. You can balance an internship, even if it's 20 hours a week, with your research needs in the summer more often than not. And so, again, personal connections can really make or break a job opportunity. So I applied to one job. So.
I'm gonna tell you, I did get rejected by Boeing for an internship, and 7 years later, I got accepted in the job with the PhD. So yeah, I got rejected because I didn't have the aerospace experience. So it's skill set, personal connections, and building that toolbox.
Perfect. That perfectly sums up everything. We don't have any more questions online. And so with that, I'd like to thank you all so much for sharing your experiences and for your thoughtful advice and guidance in today's session. I know that there are so many more questions we'd love to chat about, but time is limited. We hope that everyone joining us today were able to get their questions answered and gained valuable insight. Oh yes, as Zach mentioned now, reach out on LinkedIn if any of you have any questions. Thank you once again. Before we end, I'd like to give a quick shout out to the next sessions of this conference. The first of which is Walking the Tightrope, My Story of Finding Equilibrium in Life and Career. The second is My Life's Work, My Story, Crafting My Professional Narrative, both of which start around 4:15. Okay, thank you again. Thank you all for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye.
Bye.